Oh, hi. Didn't see you there. Today we're going to talk about House of the Dragon Season 2, the season finale. And I'm going to put on my writing hat. Yep, my special hat that I always wear when I'm writing. No, I'm just fucking with you. I don't wear a hat when I'm writing. But I am going to look at the season finale from the perspective of a writer. This is a follow on to the last video I did where I discussed my concerns about the pacing both in the series and in the Song of Ice and Fire novels. If you're interested in hearing more about that breakdown, check out this video here. But the season finale, after a couple of very dull mid-season episodes, I was rather concerned about how they would handle the season finale, worried they might make it so boring no one would care about season 3. But I hoped they would pull it off. I liked the show. It's had some memorable moments and I genuinely want to see more of it. So let's talk about it. How well or how poorly did they handle the season 2 finale? First, I'll say the episode impressed me. This show is juggling over a dozen point of view characters and an insane number of subplots. That's challenging to write, especially finale. The structure and pacing of the episode worked, both amplifying the tension and tying up the season's major story threads. In my opinion, this effectively built up anticipation for season 3 while closing a few major subplots which had dominated season 2. As a writer, that's exactly what you want to do at the end of a novel, especially if there's a sequel or if it's part of a series. And in television or movies, this is what you want to do at the end of a season or the end of a film. I could argue that setting up the next one is even more important than providing a satisfying climax and payoff for the episode itself. But I think it's also very important to pay off the promises you made along the way, giving closure to things the audience cares about while building a sense of imminent drama and conflict so people can eagerly look forward to the next season or the next book. And I'm not going to keep saying season and book. These principles apply whether you're writing fiction, writing a screenplay, or writing a teleplay. The core concepts are all the same. The media and how some elements are communicated to the audience differ, but the underlying mechanics of telling the story are the same regardless of what media you're using. So I'll look at how they pulled this off by discussing the scene level structure and how they handled major subplots. Scenes, there's a lot of them. 23 scenes, counting the final preparation for war montage as a single scene. And if you count each slice of the montage as a separate scene, you get 10 more, bringing us to 33 scenes. That is a lot to cram into 70 minutes. I think they handled this well. I could argue a few scenes weren't needed, but almost every scene served multiple purposes, not only moving the story along, but either resolving a story question or introducing a new story question that we have to wait until season 3 to watch play out. And at the same time, most scenes served additional purposes such as touching on character arcs, telling us more about the world, and bringing characters into conflict and so forth. With so many scenes, it could easily have been a sloppy mess of confusing jumps and scene changes, but the show handled transitions between the scenes quite well. I especially love the transition from Damon's vision in the Godswood to the last conversation between Aemon and Helena. That was awesome thematically and cinematographically, which comes from cinematography. What a terrible word. What an ugly word. I tried cinemagraphically, which looks and sounds better, but apparently is not a real word. So today's secret word, cinematographically. Anyway, scene transition. Anyway, a scene transition needs to immediately establish who, where, and when the scene is happening so the audience doesn't get lost. House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones both handle this well for the most part, quickly establishing where the scene is taking place and who is involved. They do this less well, establishing when, and handle jumps in time poorly. While not as confusing as the time jumps in The Witcher, which jumps back and forth without orienting the audience, House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones scene changes leave it unclear if hours, days, or weeks have passed since the last scene. When you're writing, be aware of this, as establishing a scene is significantly harder in a novel than in a movie or a TV show. You need the text equivalent of an establishing shot to make sure your reader knows where and when the scene takes place. The scenes that really didn't work were those showing Rhaena wandering around the Vale searching for Sheep Stealer. And I had to look that up. I had no idea what the dragon's name was when I was watching the show. While these scenes were mercifully short, they visited her far more than they needed to, and none of the scenes did more than remind us she was enduring privations to find the dragon. But no thanks. We got it the first time. She's a boring character. The actress does not do a good job with her, and we do not need to see any more of her. And there was a scene with Rhaenyra in Massaria. I hope I'm saying that right. With Massaria giving her yet another pep talk. That scene was useless. We have a version of that exact same scene in every one of the last 4 episodes. If Rhaenyra is growing as a leader and getting more confident, stop showing Massaria propping her up. We get it. This entire relationship needed 1 or at most 2 pep talk scenes. After that, Rhaenyra should have become the leader she was meant to be without having to be propped up like that. And the worst part about this particular scene in this particular episode, it happens after Rhaenyra confronts Daemon, making it triple redundant. She's already shown her strength. She's already established her authority. She does not need another fucking pep talk. That scene was a waste of 5 minutes of my life. Anyway, that whole scene should have been cut, no question. The other scene we really didn't need, but which I really enjoyed, was with Criston Cole encamped with his army. In the trees to hide from the dragons, remember that, being confronted by Sir Gawain Hightower about fucking the queen. We've already covered Criston Cole's arc and his doom and gloom outlook after the Battle of Rook's Rest in the previous 1, 2, 3 episodes. We really did not need to touch on it again. And he feels like an ant compared to the Dragon Riders. We get it. No need to revisit this. Yet, of the 4 or 5 scenes they've covered this in, this one works by far the best. The best dialogue, the best action, some tension, though it's false tension. I don't think the audience believed for a second these two were going to fight each other here in the woods. And it truly captured the guy's headspace and stated the principal theme of the series, which is dragons are weapons of mass destruction that should never be used in an actual war. I think that's great to reinforce the theme, and this reinforced that theme better than the previous scenes with him sulking about, acting like a big baby. So this scene did it so well, we really didn't need the 4 or 5 scenes that led up to this. It could have been one scene of him acting weird or ignoring Alicent, and we'd all connect it to his PTSD and be able to understand this and enjoy this scene when it came up. Some other details I didn't like about this scene. The sword at Cole's throat was a story loop. We knew Gawain wasn't going to kill him. That was completely fake drama, i.e. melodrama. But confronting him about banging or being banged by the queen, that was good tension. That was good character building. And the other thing is, these 2 leaders of the army would not have this kind of confrontation within earshot of dozens of their soldiers. That was just stupid. And I thought it was interesting that when the confrontation started, there were 3 or 4 guys in the background who stopped what they were doing and watched. And yet, by the last couple cuts in the scene, those dudes had gone back to like muddling about the camp. If something like this happened in an army like this, it would start with 3 or 4 guys noticing, and by the end of their conversation, there'd be a crowd of 200 people staring at them, trying to figure out what the fuck was going on, and all of them would have heard about his affair with the queen, so that cat would be way out of the bag. So that part of the scene was pretty stupid. I also liked that their armor was off. You don't wear armor on the march. And I like, as I mentioned, that they were in the trees since it was established they need to hide from the dragons, and I feel the show's been doing a good job showing it. Though it was interesting that the montage at the end showed armies marching in the open, and only one of them appeared to have a dragon flying cap, so that was interesting. Inconsistent, or did they just forget to show the dragons guarding the other armies? And is there a writing lesson here? Maybe the lesson is don't give secondary characters too much screen time, and don't spend a long time dwelling on their emotional changes. A little foreshadowing, then hit us with the meaningful part. You don't need this slow build-up over multiple chapters or multiple scenes, especially for a minor character. Bottom line, lots of scenes, handled well, not much redundancy or downtime. If I were the executive producer, I'd have cut about 4 minutes of fluff and most of the Rahina wandering the Vale scenes, but the rest, in my opinion, was very solid. Now let's talk about pacing. Last time I ripped on the show's pacing. It can be very uneven. But this episode felt tense. There was a lot of buildup. Most of the episode was built up with only one major resolution and one maybe resolution. So it kept going up and up and up for the most part, and they were clever with the order of things, letting the beginning start with some humor and less dramatic bits, with more and more tense things happening as the episode progressed. That's good storytelling, it's good television writing. There were only a couple of light comic relief scenes, which was good because those can quickly overwhelm the more serious storylines. And even these scenes introduced a new character, put a new threat on the board, and established new conflicts. So even the comic relief scenes served multiple purposes at once. I like it. That's good writing. And I thought the last bit was clever in the way it put the audience on a rail and had some ups and downs in the tension, but ended on a major escalation of that tension. It starts with the scene being interrupted with a message from Harrenhold. The next scene is the climactic confrontation between Rhaenyra and Daemon, which I consider the climactic moment for the season, closing a chapter in both of their stories. That was a very good scene and very important to the story. This was followed by a couple of lower tension scenes, and then the final confrontation between Alicent and Rhaenyra. That scene was very tense for Alicent and highlighted how each of them had changed, in some ways reversing roles. And although that scene was kind of low key, wasn't an action scene, it was very dramatic. And this is where things hit an emotional climax with Alicent choosing a great sacrifice to get what she wanted. And in doing so, set up a twisted web of betrayal and conflict we're going to see at the start of season 2. That was awesome. And then that scene ended quietly and was followed by a montage of all the preparations for war, all of the imminent world building conflict that's about to be unleashed now that all the pieces are on the board. And that montage really rebuilt the tension and left us there right at the end, waiting for season 3 to resolve it. That kind of up down pattern is really good for the end of a book, a season, a series, or a movie, and it gives the audience a sense of completion for the arcs and major conflicts that we did see resolved, yet makes them want more, as so much more conflict was just waved in their face and left unresolved. I love it. So my take is that they handled the pacing very precisely and in the right way to maintain our interest in the show overall. The exact same story elements told in a different order could easily have bored us all to tears, but they wove it together expertly. Hats off to them. And subplots, I was going to talk a bit about the subplots, but I feel like this is running long, so I'll just say they juggle a crazy number of subplots in this show. There are so many moving parts in this story. I think that's what makes the series so engaging, yet subplots are an Achilles heel that can slow the show to a crawl, and the sheer volume of subplots makes it complicated to write, edit, and tie together in a way that doesn't bleed off all the drama as it skips around. They really flubbed this in Season 2, Episode 5 and Season 2, Episode 6, but got it right in most of the other episodes. And I would say the writing lesson here is don't try a story this complicated with this many points of view and subplots until you've written at least 5 or 6 books. This kind of plot jumping, point of view switching complexity is really hard to get right, and it takes exponentially longer to write than a simpler narrative structure. And since you can summarize the details of the other things happening that affect the story, you don't really need to have a character there actually doing the thing for the audience to follow along with what happened and understand why it matters. And for most writers, that's the best way to handle it. But when you try this, when you try something this complicated, if you pull it off, you will be among the writing gods. So it is a skill worth working up to. So I'd encourage people to try once you're very comfortable with pacing, very comfortable with switching points of view, and very comfortable with keeping track of all those things. Anyway, I thought the finale worked. It held my attention. I watched it twice, once for the experience, once for the analysis, and I enjoyed it both times. They struck a fine balance between providing resolution and answers to a few major story arcs, introduced one new story arc, and raised the tension enough to keep us excited about what's going to happen next.